Hey, this is Mr. Bus, and this video is going to go through the AP Bio magic sand activity. So we're learning about things like hydrophobic, hydrophilic substances and compounds, whether something's polar, non-polar, and so on, or ionic. And so the first part of this, experiment with magic sand and water. So we have a little container full of some magic sand. It's just coated with a hydrophobic substance. So I got some beakers here. So let's use this one for the magic sand. So it kind of sits on top, floats on top. You can kind of push into it and it'll keep your finger dry. And also if you put a lot in there, you can see it definitely does not act like normal sand. It's really trying to keep away from the water as much as possible. So it's hydrophobic, or water-fearing. All right, so that's the magic sand. Describe the observations there. Kind of clumped up. Zoom in there a little bit. Regular silica sand, made of quartz, mostly, right? So there you go. So that was number 1 and 2. Experiment with magic sand and water and normal silica sand and water. Normal sand does not repel water, right? Magic sand does. It's hydrophobic. Number 3, all right, sprinkle some pepper on the surface of water. All right, and then I've got these toothpicks, which are they've got red food coloring on one end and then soap on the other. So when the red end, the food coloring goes in there, it doesn't really affect anything. Food coloring, if you Google it, it's actually a polar compound. So it doesn't seem to be having really any effect. If anything, some of the pepper molecules will even stick to it. The other end with the soap. Now soap's going to have an effect on the hydrogen bonds in the water. All right. So describe and explain your observations of the floating pepper when each side of the toothpick is used to contact the surface of the water. There you go. There.
What is it, a Cheeto?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's making all the algae go away from it.
Ren, do this one, do this one.
Do another one. Throw one over here.
Is it like an experiment? But why don't
Yeah, look. Look at it, makes all the algae go away.
Free Cheetos.
Number 4, we're going to do the penny and the droplets of water on the penny. 1, 2. You can kind of see the water beating up on top of the penny there. You know, what's going on? Remember, we've got those hydrogen bonds. Those water molecules are all sticking to one another and forming basically a whole bubble of water on top of that penny. Oh, there we go. Try the same thing with something that doesn't form hydrogen bonds. So we'll use a different penny. And we'll just try doing the same thing with alcohol. So no hydrogen bonds are forming here. So the molecules are not sticking to one another. So, just comparing the two, I definitely couldn't build up as many droplets on top of the penny before it started to go over the edge there. All right. Number 5, use the tweezers to float a staple on top of some water. Okay. Let's try it with a paper clip. Here's a paper clip. So why is that happening? How is that possible? That a metal staple and a metal paper clip can sit on the surface of water without falling through, and I can push them through, right? Once I push them through, they go through all the way to the bottom. But at the surface, the water molecules were all hydrogen bonding with each other, making it so that something that should have gone through the water right away eventually went through when it pushed through those hydrogen bonds, but it had to break through. So surface tension is a property of water that allows things that should go through the water, allows them to float on the water. Number 6. Okay, for numbers 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 on the write-up, I had these test tubes in class kind of already prepared. So 6 says copper sulfate is a blue ionic crystal substance. So I took this copper sulfate crystal and added it to some water. Okay, so it dissolved. Why did it dissolve? Because the water molecules surrounded the ionic compound, copper with a positive charge and sulfate with a negative charge, and it dissolved it since water is polar, has a charge. Copper sulfate, when placed in mineral spirits, all right, well, mineral spirits, basically it's an oily compound, so it's a hydrocarbon, non-polar molecule, and so it's used to clean up oil-based paints from paintbrushes and stuff like that. So when I added copper sulfate to mineral spirits, the crystals are still just sitting there on the bottom of the test tube, and they didn't dissolve. Why? Because non-polar molecules, non-polar liquids like mineral spirits, don't have a charge, and so they can't dissolve ionic compounds. So that was 6, copper sulfate in water and copper sulfate in mineral spirits. Copper sulfate being an ionic compound. Number 7, we have glucose. So very similar, except glucose is a polar molecule rather than copper sulfate, which is an ionic compound. So we know this is sugar dissolved in water. We know that you can dissolve sugar in water. Well, water is polar and so is sugar, and like dissolves like. And so sugar dissolved in water. Same story as the copper sulfate. The sugar, which is a polar molecule, will not dissolve in mineral spirits. So that was 7. Number 8, vegetable oil. So water, down the bottom here, water is a polar molecule. Vegetable oil, so water and vegetable oil, they don't mix. Vegetable oil is a hydrocarbon, non-polar. Water is a polar molecule, so they don't mix. And here, I just added vegetable oil to mineral spirits. Looks pretty uniform because the two mix together really well. So because they're both hydrocarbons, they're both nonpolar, so they mix together well. Okay, so we've made all of our observations, but there's a couple post-lab questions. In the table lists which molecules are from the lab are hydrophobic and which are hydrophilic. So glucose sugar. Remember, glucose sugar dissolved in water, and because it dissolved, it is hydrophilic. It likes water. So the next one, vegetable oil. Vegetable oil sat on top of the water. It is hydrophobic, hydrophoring. It did not like mixing with the water. Copper sulfate. This chemical here, copper sulfate, the blue chemical, dissolved in water, so it is hydrophilic. It likes water. Mineral spirits. Well, I didn't put mineral spirits in water, but I put mineral spirits in vegetable oil, and since the two mixed, we know that both mineral spirits and vegetable oil are nonpolar. And being nonpolar, they don't like water. So mineral spirits would do the same thing that vegetable oil does, is it would just sit on top of the water, it would just float. And so mineral spirits and water do not like each other, so it is hydrophobic. The pepper, I would say, is hydrophilic because it liked the food coloring, and so the food coloring was hydrophilic. I already dumped it up with the magic sand in the water. It repelled the water, so magic sand is hydrophobic, and silica sand is hydrophilic. So that's 9. 10, describe why you can get more water droplets than alcohol droplets on a penny. It's because of surface tension and hydrogen bonding. The water molecules are sticking to each other and allowing the water bubble to fill up higher on the penny. You could also say for 10, the property of water could also be cohesion, is the idea that water molecules are sticking to themselves. Draw 3 water molecules and show their partial charges. I'll just give a little plug to the textbook here. On page 21 of the book, it does show 2 water molecules. Remember that between the oxygen and the hydrogen atom, here we go, we have a polar covalent bond causing partial charges, partial negative on the oxygen, partial positive on the hydrogen. And then between water molecules, we get hydrogen bonds. So the partial negative of the oxygen is attracted to the partial positive of the hydrogen of different water molecules and get these hydrogen bonds forming. Okay, so don't hesitate to open the book, pages 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, to help with the concepts of the lab. And again, this is part of our Flex folder work this week as well, to go through this chapter 2, the chemistry, life chemistry and energy and so on. So there you go. Good luck with finishing the write-up, and send me a Schoology message as always if you have any questions.